Okay, let's jump right in. We're exploring a huge debate happening right now inside the world of academic research. And it's a debate that could totally change what kind of knowledge gets created and, well, what gets valued. The big question is this: how do we actually measure the impact of scholarly work?
This incredible question from Martin Luther King Jr. really just nails what we're talking about today. It's all about contribution, about value, about purpose. And while it's a question for all of us, it has a really specific, urgent meaning when we talk about academic research. And this is where we zoom in from that big, universal idea to the very specific, very high-stakes world of university research. See, for academics, this isn't just some philosophical thought experiment. The answer to this question literally shapes careers. It decides who gets funding. And when you think about it, it ultimately dictates the entire direction of human knowledge. So, here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the academic impact game and what's called the narrow view of success. Then, we'll dive into a really cool idea, the pluralist solution. We'll see how that helps to open the ivory tower, forces us to rethink rewards, and finally, we'll take a peek at the exciting and kind of complicated future of impact. So let's kick things off with part one, the impact game. Before we get into all the different ways to measure this stuff, you have to understand why this conversation matters so much. For a researcher, defining impact isn't just an abstract exercise. It is the engine of their entire career. It's a game where the rules determine everything. We're talking tenure, promotions, grant money, you name it. That leads us right into part two, a narrow view of success. So, how has this game traditionally been played? Well, for decades, especially at the big research universities, one particular system has been king. And as we're about to see, this so-called common approach has created some really deep systemic problems. And here it is. This is what's known as the common approach. It seems simple, right? It basically treats academic citations as the main, and let's be honest, often the only currency of value. The whole assumption is more citations equals more impact, case closed. But is it really that simple? Well, here's the problem. This laser focus on one number creates this win-at-all-costs mindset. It forces researchers into a false choice, a really damaging trade-off. The system basically tells them, look, you can do rigorous research that other academics will cite, or you can do relevant research that might be useful in the real world. The implication is you can't have both. And this gets right to the core of it. Way back in 1994, a researcher named Don Hambrick called it exactly what it felt like, an incestuous closed loop. The system just becomes this self-referential game, a big echo chamber, where academics are only talking to each other. They're reading, citing, and writing for the same small group, and that just widens the gap between the world of ideas and the world of practice. Okay, so that's the problem. Now for part three, the pluralist solution. This is where the story shifts. The research we're looking at offers a powerful new way of thinking. And this isn't just some small adjustment. It's a totally different vision for what impact can and should be. It's more holistic and, frankly, a lot more useful. It's called the pluralist conceptualization. And this is really the turning point. It's a fundamental change in mindset. So instead of a single-lane road where only citations matter, this idea opens up a multi-lane superhighway of what we can consider valuable and impactful work. Which brings us to part four, opening the ivory tower. So, how does this new model actually work? What does it really mean to break down those walls? Well, it's a framework that's built on two core, and I think you'll agree, game-changing pillars. The first pillar is recognizing that there are multiple stakeholders. This is a huge deal. It's saying that academic work isn't just for other professors. It can and it should make a difference to a whole range of people, from students in a classroom to managers in a boardroom, all the way to government policymakers and just society in general. And the second pillar just makes sense, right? If you've got multiple stakeholders, you need multiple ways to measure impact. So this expands the very definition of what counts as evidence. Impact isn't just about citations anymore. It can be seen in scholarly awards, in media coverage, and being cited in public policy, or even directly influencing business through consulting. And I mean, when you put the two models side by side like this, the difference is just night and day. On the left, you have the common approach, rigid, narrow, and creating that zero-sum game of rigor versus relevance. But on the right, the pluralist model is flexible, it's sensitive to different stakeholders, and it works on a synergistic mindset where rigor and relevance can actually make each other stronger. Okay, so for part five, we're rethinking research and rewards. It's one thing to have a great model on paper, but what happens when a university actually decides to go for it?
Well, the effects aren't just cosmetic. They can be truly transformative. They can change the very DNA of how a place pursues and values knowledge. But making this change isn't as simple as just flipping a switch. It takes a really clear three-step process. First, the school has to get crystal clear on its mission. Who do they really want to serve? Second, they have to define exactly how they're going to measure impact for those key groups. And then finally, and this is the absolute kicker, they have to align the reward systems. You have to pay, promote, and recognize the very behavior you want to see. The benefits here are just huge. This model encourages what's called engaged scholarship, research that actually tries to solve real problems. It creates knowledge that people can use. And because it has multiple criteria, the whole system is much harder to game than just counting citations. But maybe most importantly, it completely reframes the core question from an either-or choice to a both-and opportunity.
And that brings us to our final section, the future of impact. So now that we have this broader idea, let's look ahead. Let's explore the new tools and the new questions that are popping up to help us measure this much richer, more complex sense of scholarly impact. One of the most promising new areas is something called altmetrics. Really, the easiest way to think about them is as the digital footprint of a piece of research. They go way beyond that closed loop of academic journals to capture attention and engagement all across the web.
So in practice, what does that mean? Well, altmetrics can track stuff like how many times an article is viewed or downloaded, how many people bookmark it, how often it's mentioned in the news or shared on Twitter, or even if it's being used as a source on Wikipedia. These tools give you a real-time snapshot of how research is being discussed and used by a global audience. But this all leads to a really big and kind of thorny question. We can measure all this online activity, sure, but is it actually a measure of impact? Is a tweet the same as a change in public policy? Is a viral article the same as an influential one? Basically, is all online attention created equal?
And to see just how tricky this is, check out this surprising and totally real example. A 2009 biology paper about bat fellatio became one of the most popular research articles ever, according to altmetrics. It got over 300,000 views, thousands of shares. But in the traditional academic world, it got just 4 citations. It perfectly highlights a challenge, doesn't it? We have to figure out how to separate fleeting, popular buzz from substantive, lasting influence.
And that leaves us with one last big idea to chew on. This whole debate, it's not just about measurement systems and academic careers. It's about something so much bigger. If we fundamentally change how we define and reward success in the search for knowledge, what new discoveries will we unlock? What new problems will we solve? That's the real potential here. That's what's so exciting.